Ryan, I didn't see anything in the chat. Do we start up or what's up? I'll wait until you tell me to start up.
Yeah, we can go ahead and start.
All right, everybody. Then get ready. Here we go. 3, 2, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Get It podcast, where we get it every day. Our mission here at Get is to get people involved in the political process who are not typically involved in the political process. My name is Roy, aka the Carpenter's Apprentice, and with me on this journey, I have some fantastic co-hosts, starting with the first, but certainly not the least, Ryan.
The first and not the least. Okay, I'll take it. What's up, everyone? I'm Ryan, a journalist, marketer, and I'm super excited to be here today. So let's get started.
Next up, we got the bold and the beautiful Andrea.
Thank you so much. I am bold, I am beautiful. I'll take that. Andrea Hernandez here, undocumented citizen. And what I mean by that is I still believe that I'm a beautiful part of this country, even if I am undocumented. Thank you, everybody. I'm so excited for this episode.
Very good. Next up, the tenacious, the talented Mr. Chad Hankins.
Those might be the best adjectives you've ever given me, Roy. Thank you. My name is Chad. I am a writer. I am an envious person looking at Ryan's awesome Madonna mic set for the millionth time and wishing I had one. And that's about all I am today.
Very good. And last but not least, the fantastic, the wonderful, the most beautiful, the queen of San Antonio politics herself, the one, the only, Denise Hernandez. And she will be introducing our special guest of the night, Miss Denise.
Hi, everyone. That was very nice, Roy. That was a little too nice. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. My name is Denise Hernandez. I'm a fifth generation San Antonian. I currently work for City Councilman Trevino in District 1, but I have been an advocate and an activist since 2013 here in San Antonio. So with that said, I would love, and it is my honor, to introduce Miss Rosie Castro, the one and only, the enigma, the powerhouse, someone who inspires me to get up every day and work as hard as I can for this community. I just want to give you her brief bio here. Miss Rosie Castro is an American civil rights activist and educator from San Antonio, Texas, who has been involved in several prominent groups, such as the Young Democrats of America, the Mexican American Youth Organization, the Committee for Barrio Betterment, and La Raza Unida Party. She is the mother of presidential candidate and former mayor of San Antonio, Julián Castro, who should be the president right now, if I do say so myself, and U.S. Congressman Joaquin Castro, who should also be the president at some point, but those are my opinions. So welcome, Rosie. We're so happy to have you here, and it's an honor to share space with you.
Thank you so much, Denise, for that great introduction, and thank all of you for allowing me to be here today. First of all, I really want to apologize for being late. I had so much trouble with Zoom, and it was giving me messages I have never seen before. And I guess that's because of the new year. But despite that, I've got to say that today I'm very optimistic looking at you guys and knowing that we start a new year with a lot of hope. Of course, we've had inaugurations today. We look forward to changes that will be made, including those that will look at, I hope, a more permanent solution for the immigration issues that we have had in this country, so that all of us who have been here for a while will be able to continue to live here and enjoy citizenship. So thank you for the hosting, and I'm anxious to see what you have to say, what questions you all might have.
Well, Ms. Castro, allow me to open it up with some current event questions. The first one I want to ask you is this. Recently, you've talked about Ted Cruz and the need for Ted Cruz to be ousted from office. You said that you believed one of your boys needed to run against Ted Cruz. Number one, who is the favorite of yours to run against him for that Senate seat? And number two, why do you believe your boys, either one of them, would be better than Ted Cruz in the Senate?
Well, let me say that, I think either one of my sons is eminently qualified. I do not believe that Mr. Cruz is. I don't believe that he represents many of us in the state of Texas, and particularly with the role that he played last Wednesday, which was, for me, as the mother of a congressperson, you can imagine a very scary time. I was really, first of all, shocked to see the kind of actions that we saw, people invading the Capitol. That has never been heard of in my lifetime. The other thing was the reaction by law enforcement to that invasion really shocked me, because I did feel that had that been people of color, there would have been a stop to it much earlier than there was. I was shocked also because I was saddened in a lot of ways, because, we're often folks that think differently, that are on the left, so-called. We're often said that, oh, we do these marches and demonstrations and get out of control. But I know in all the times that I have marched for years, and all the times that I have seen peaceful demonstrations like this last summer with Black Lives Matters, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen the left get out of hand in this kind of manner. So overall, I was very, very surprised, very shocked, very horrified. And of course, I was praying all through it, as were many of my friends and several constituents that asked about Joaquin, because we were really afraid that there might be some destruction of life there, not just destruction of the property. So,
Ms. Castro, I want to go into depth on that just a little bit.
sure.
When you first saw that this was happening at the Capitol, that the insurrectionists were breaking into the Capitol and actually getting into the walls of the Capitol, what was your first move? Did you call or text Joaquin? And if you did, what was it that he told you?
Now, right away, I called Julián because y'all probably know Julián and Joaquin are like inseparable with each other. So I knew he probably would have already talked to Joaquin. I didn't want to have too many of us calling Joaquin, because I figured that, one, I didn't know where he was, if he was in the office, if he was in the Capitol count where they were counting the votes or recounting the votes. So I first called Julián to find out where Joaquin was. And then shortly thereafter, Joaquin was interviewed, so we could hear that he was in his office with another representative and with two staff members. I was concerned not only for Joaquin, but also, and other representatives, but also the staff that is there. And so I was able to talk to Julián. A few hours later, I texted Joaquin, and they were still, as you know, this went on till about 2 or 3 in the morning. So I tried to communicate by text and let him have the phone open in case he needed that. That, we didn't really know what was going on. And I think now we're finding out how much worse it was than we knew. And so my fear was to tie up the telephone when he might need it. I didn't want to do that.
Thank you so much for giving us a window into what that moment was like for you. I now want to give my co-hosts an opportunity to kick it off with questions. If any of you have a question, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Okay, let's start with Chad Hankins.
So speaking on Ted Cruz, is there any way for you to like set up a meeting with him? Are you able to like talk to any of his people? Have you been able to interact in any way like in after this situation?
Well, he's not been the kind of person that's easy to get a hold of, and they're not wanting to talk to their constituents very, very often, particularly when the constituents are not of the same political party. And I think that's a problem. We just saw an example of that today, where the governor did not include the county commissioner and the mayor of Houston, when they were in Houston talking about the COVID vaccination. And you know, the county and the mayor are folks that make things happen in terms of who will be giving those vaccinations. My point is, I think whether we're Democrats, Republicans, Independents, whatever, when we are elected, we're elected for all the people, and we should respond to all the people. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. But no, I've never met with Ted Cruz personally, and when I have mailed things, you know, sometimes you send out emails to your senators on different issues. I've never gotten a response. So I just don't see, for me, I'm sure there's not a big hope that he would want to have some kind of meeting.
So we really wanted to start from the beginning. So like the beginning of your time in San Antonio. And I want to pass it to Denise for some questions about San Antonio then and San Antonio now.
Sure.
Right. So Rosie, I think for a lot of folks who do get involved in social justice work, it begins with personal experiences and personal stories. And I know I've read that that's true for you too. Were there any, experiences in particular that you just knew, like, I have to get involved, I have to change this?
Well, I think from the very early days, one of the things that made me get involved was what has made you get involved, and that was voter registration and voter education. When I first went to college, that's where I really started to get involved because I had hoped to be a teacher. And one of the things that we were asked to do was to look at who were the candidates for governor that year and what was their stance on education, educational funding, bilingual ed, all of that. Well, as we were looking at those things, though, we still did not have the right to vote at 18 during that time. And so one of the things that I got involved with, besides the Young Democrats, was that I was asked by a state senator at that time, Senator Joe Bernal, to testify before the Texas House for the right to vote at 18. Now, I wish I could tell you a story about how I testified and it happened. No. First of all, I did testify, but at that time in Texas, the Democrats were basically very much like the Republicans today. They were the conservatives. They did not believe in a lot of things that we were hoping as young people to see done. And they were mainly an old agrarian, agricultural number, a majority in the Texas Senate and in the Texas House. And so that was very difficult for a young person. I guess I must have been about 21 at that time. Not 21, about 19 or so at that time. And it was something else going up against all of these folks. What happened was that the US Congress then went ahead and lowered the voting age to 18. And of course, by that time I had already turned 21 probably, but that was very important to me. And so one of the things that we did was that we continued to try and register people to vote, because even though we couldn't vote, the fact was that many of our parents, our neighbors, the people we knew were old enough to vote, but were not voting. It's interesting, the TOP, Texas Organizing Project, just had a survey done, which was a person-to-person survey. And one of the things that this survey found was that it was done by Dr. Cecilia Bailly out of Houston, who is an anthropologist, and her team. One of the things they found was that people don't vote if there's no one in the family that votes, okay? So if you're from a family that people vote in, the likelihood is you're gonna vote. If you're from a family where nobody votes, there's no likelihood that you will vote unless you run into people like you. If you run into a person at school, at church, in a group you belong to, one of your friends that votes, they can influence you, and you may then influence a family. So I know that you all do a lot of work around trying to get people to vote, trying to get them registered. trying to get them to look at the issues. That was the very first thing that got me involved, because so many things that we were seeing at that time, for particularly for Mexican Americans, for Chicanos, were really bad. We were treated like second-class citizens. We were not paid what we were worth. We were often not allowed into certain institutions. We did not have good health care. We did not have, in our communities, we often had situations that were compared to third world countries. And I knew that the only way in America you can change that is by having elected representatives that will do that. Now, I say that, and some people will say, well, that's not the only way. No, it may not be the only way, but because there are people outside of elected politicians that can influence legislation. But unless you have people inside that care about you and about your issues, it's very hard to get legislation enacted. So anyway, to me, that was the start. You got to be registered. You gotta help people understand why it's important to vote. And I think y'all are doing a very good job of that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Andrea is going to go next.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Rosie. I think it's beautiful how some people are willing to just start when they see something happening in their community. For the people that don't know, maybe Rosie, you may be willing to talk a little bit about this, but you openly have talked in the past about your mom having an impact on you, on the way that you view things now. I'm wondering, as an immigrant myself, how did living in an immigrant family impact the way that you look things now, especially now as we're seeing so much change happening in our country?
Well, I think, my mom came over as an orphan with her sister. And I mean, she had a very sad life in a lot of ways because she had lost her parents. Her grandparents could not take care of her. She came with a family she barely knew. And then she was split when she got here to San Antonio. Her sister went with one part of the family and she was with another part. Even though they were both in San Antonio, they were separated. So that, as well as, the loss of your family. That's why I think for me, this issue of separating the children is just incredibly sad and something I try to make sure that we're doing something about. And that's why you see Joaquin often visiting the camps and stuff, trying to persuade other legislators that we cannot have this kind of separation. But the fact that mom went through all of that and then coming to this country again, learning a new language, part of what happened to her, she started school, but she was taken out at the third grade. And so despite that, she learned how to read and speak in English as well as Spanish. So she was a strong person in very many ways, but in other ways, she was also a very dependent person. And that's, I think, one of the things that happens in the immigrant community. What can happen is that since you don't have the rights of a citizen, you're often having to be in those shadows, having to be afraid of whether you're going to be picked up or a parent is going to be picked up and taken back. Now, fortunately, when my mother immigrated, it was a time when things were a lot looser, okay? It wasn't as bad as now. So there was a lot more crossing the border that was allowed. She did it legally, but legally then did not mean as much as it did now with the kind of cost that it takes, with all the paperwork, with all the waiting. Now, she did have to wait a number of years to be a citizen, and she did not vote until I was involved with Rasnida. So there was a long gap of time before she decided to vote. But because she was not a full citizen, I think she suffered from that lack of education. I didn't know till many years later that she had wanted to be a reporter. She had wanted to see her name in lights, and to see her name beside something she had written. Well, she never got the chance to do that because of the lack of education. Instead, she was a maid and a cook, babysat. But because I know what she was like, I have no doubt that had she had the opportunities, she could have achieved that. And instead, we had an opportunity. She made sure that I had the opportunity to go to school, to go to college, and then that my grandsons, because she took care of my sons, that they also had opportunities that she never had. So I think that, Julian talks about life not being a sprint, but that we pass the baton on to each other. And I think that, with immigrant families, you see that very much so. That the first folks that get here work really hard to build a life for their children and for their families. And they leave us and give us a lot, not only material things, but the cultural things and the values that often help people to succeed.
Ryan is going to keep us moving forward, but before he gets to it, I want to ask you this. Do you think Julian going after Joe Biden so strongly during the Democratic primaries when he told them, did you forget what it is that you just said,
Yeah.
has made him inapplicable for this first round of cabinet secretary nominations?
Well, I think my personal view is yes, that there's a grudge there. That's me. Okay. I'm a mother. So that's my feeling. We'll see.
Very good. I won't ask you no more tough shit. Now it's time for Ryan.
That's Roy for you. So not surprised.
No, right.
So we want to talk about community activism and workers' rights. I'm going to pass it to Andrea to start us off.
Yeah, again, I think you put it perfectly, and I agree with you, Rosie. I think in immigrant families, we pass the baton. And I think something that I've seen from you, especially in the last couple of years, is that you have passed the baton over in many occasions, but you're also still very involved in the community. You're still being involved in issues that really matter to you and that I can tell you feel really passionate about. So you mentioned TOP earlier. You are on the board of Texas Organizing Project.
Yes.
I want to know, talking about workers' rights, talking about all the issues that have been brought up during your career, what is a highlight that you have seen regarding this particular issue?
Regarding immigration or regarding
Workers' rights.
workers' rights. One of the things, I mean, TOP as well as other groups like Joel and many of you are working on workers' rights. And I think that watching Julian's campaign where he did marches with the 15, for $15 minimum wage and other workers' rights, I think that one of the highlights has been that it looks like we're going to get that 15 minimum, okay? That's just one thing. What was a disappointment to me was that the fight for that TOP and several other people undertook, but the chambers were against, which was the paid sick leave. To me, that's very important. I know that as a mother, when my sons were young, I worked for the city and we had that paid sick leave. And that was very important. If the kids get sick on you, what's your choice? You're going to leave, not come to your job, not get paid, maybe get fired because you didn't show up that day because that's not right. We need to have paid sick leave. We talk a lot about poverty in our city, but we have to look at those pieces of policies that actually would help us to get away from poverty. And paid sick leave is one of those issues, as is minimum wage. But until we really strategically think about how do we really help individuals get out of poverty, to me, we're not going to move people up unless we put all the pieces together. I think this issue we just voted on for training is a very good one. To me, I've always said education is a way out of poverty. But there are other issues when we talk about workers' rights, like pay, like the paid sick leave, like the ability to unionize, and other issues that we really have to look at and put into place. I thank Roberto because Roberto Trevino really supported those efforts, as did Sandoval, Ana, and some of the other folks. But I think that that's one of the things that we need to do, and I'm disappointed that we've not done it now. Maybe we're going to see some action there on other workers' rights issues, I hope, within the next year or so nationally. And sometimes, you have to have things happening nationally so that they filter down finally to the local level.
No, and you're absolutely right. And just to point out really quickly, your twins went viral when the paid sick time ordinance was happening in San Antonio. Someone tweeted at Joaquin, "Thank you for speaking today," and it was actually Julián. So, and it was, but still, it's a beautiful sentiment that our past mayor was still showing up to our city council to talk about issues that matter to him in our city. So obviously, I know Top was there, and I know you were there representing.
Yeah. Well, there's still a lot of work to do, as you know. But I'm hopeful that we're going to see some changes this year, like I say, at the national level, but also at the local level. One of the things that everyone has talked about, which again, y'all are part of, was how the phenomenal amount of people that came out for this election. And as an educator, one of the things I've seen was if you looked at the dropout rate in high school, for example, it was so high. The college going rate was so low, and it has been for a long time. But over the years, because so many different groups have been working on it, it continues to rise. That's the same thing that I think we're going to see with voting, and particularly among people of color, that all these different groups that are working on registering people, on educating people, on getting people out to vote, are making a huge difference. We've seen those changes in Georgia, Arizona, and I think we're going to see changes in Texas. I like to think of, because I know a lot of you are artists, and you enjoy creativity. I like to think about what we're doing in terms of building the culture of voting as people working on a sculpture. That sculpture is Miss America or Mr. America, but it represents the culture of voting. All of us are working at it at a different piece, but we've coordinated so that in the end, we'll have one giant statue. And in the end, those of us that are working together in San Antonio, I think will create that culture of voting that we've been longing for.
Yeah, speaking of voting, you talked about this a little earlier, but I wonder if you could tell us what the importance of voting in local elections is.
Well, I'm going to say one thing, Ryan, right now. I was thinking about what y'all wanted to talk about, and one of the things that really bothers me that I hope we can do something about is school board voting. You can run for school board and get elected with less than 5,000 votes. That shouldn't be. And we all talk about education, how important it is, and still we have districts where people just don't come out to vote for their school board member. And unless you can get that very basic element of voting, you're never going to grow the others that much either. You're going to grow them some, but until we get people interested in those very small parts of government, like the school boards, we don't get what we need. And so the importance of voting to me is that we all have goals. We all have aspirations for ourselves and for our children. We all have dreams about how we could make things better in life. But that doesn't happen by itself. And in the country that is a democracy, it's going to happen by someone representing you that knows what you want, is in tandem with those goals and dreams, and will vote that way when they get a chance to create policy. And so if we don't vote, then there's nobody looking out for you. As I was growing up, we saw that very much. So, and I often tell the story that, when I was like in my 20s and just getting started in politics, that at that time, the Democrats were the conservative Democrats in particular ruled Texas. And the kind of money that was put into sheep and goats, roads and highways was astronomical. Everybody talked about how wonderful the highways were in Texas. We had wonderful sheep and goats taken care of, but we had very poor education. We have been next to last in education nationally. That is a crime. And now we're not next to last. We're still in the 40s though, of all the states. That should not be. And so if we want to change that, then we need to start at that basic level of making sure we have excellent school board members that will take those concerns to the next level, to the state level. Make sure there's more money put into education. Make sure that education for disabled children, for example, for mental health, for all those issues that for too many years we've neglected, that's what we need to see done if we want better education. And also for better education on the college level. Let's say 20 years ago, the state of Texas would put so much more money as a percentage of the whole education bill for higher ed or for elementary through 12, K through 12. They put in a lot bigger percentage than they do now. And so for over the years, we've allowed the state legislature to basically back down from its promise to us to educate the people of Texas. I think you saw that a couple of years ago, there was a little bit more money put in there. And that's because people have been working on the legislature and on the governor for quite a while now. For 4 years, federally, we haven't seen much money in education. I think you're going to see more now. So it's important to vote for a number of reasons, and all of us could probably state why we have that passion to get people registered and to get them voting. But I know one thing, and that is that none of us should be looked at as second-class citizens for any reason, because of the language you speak, the color of your skin, who you love, none of that. And if we want things to be better in this country, then we need to make sure that we're doing our part by voting. If any of
Very
you
good, Ms.
you-
Castro.
Sure.
I have an audio comment for you, and then I have a question.
Sure.
The comment I have from you is from Erlinda Cortez. Thanks, Rosie, for sharing your experience in the early 70s to help the next generation understand our history and our responsibility for the future of this country. Now, the question I wanted to ask you was this. In 2012, I had heard from a political consultant who was rather higher up that Hillary Clinton had told Julián Castro straight up, point blank, there is no list, there is only you when it comes to the vice presidency. I took that to almost be fact. So then when I hear on NPR that that guy came from Virginia becomes a vice presidential nominee, I am quite shocked myself because I was believing that Julián Castro would be the vice presidential nominee. To your knowledge, was Julián ever promised a vice presidential position?
No.
Was he disappointed not to get it? Or were you disappointed he didn't get it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, of course. But I mean, that's what happens. I think that you go through a very deep process of a bunch of questions that the whole family, friends, and Julián and everybody has to, the vetting process
So does that mean, I'm sorry, just to stop you right there. Does that mean in 2016, you guys did go through the vice presidential vetting process?
Yeah. Yes. Everybody that she looked at seriously went through that process. But however the decision was made, you know, they felt that Thomas Kane brought in more from that. They're always concerned about that mid, area of the United States. And so they felt that he would bring in more of those people, Pennsylvania, Ohio. Those are the states that, you kept hearing during the election.
Well, Rosie, you're a rabble rouser like me. Why do you think it is that they keep continuing to focus on the middle of the country? And let's be honest about it, white folks, more so than it is that they focus on us, the Latinos and the folks here down south?
Because that's been the strategy forever. And the political consultants, that the party, both parties, neither party, hire that many people of color as consultants. Generally, the consultants that are hired, even by the party, but by candidates, are not people of color. You get a few, but the ones making the decisions have kind of a rote way of looking at things. And the idea is it's going to be white folks that determine the election. Now, some of that is changing. Biden, remember in this last election, Biden was way behind. And what happened? Here comes South Carolina. That made it. Now, he has to be beholden to those folks that brought him to the dance. And then you look at what happened in Nevada. The Latino vote in Nevada helped to change Nevada. Arizona, I'm sorry, and Nevada. What happens in other areas where there were a number of Latinos, he took that vote. So I think they understand, and everybody understands that if you had Texas, and if Texas changes, that's going to be the end of the ball game, just about. So I think we'll have people looking at this state because we're a very diverse state in terms of African American, Latinos, Native Americans, Asians. We're a diverse state. And so in the future, you're going to see more focus, I think, on what's happening in those states that are more diverse.
Well, I think you're 100% correct. Before I move on to Chad Hankins, who actually has a very specific question for you guys, I'm wondering, in 2020, did you guys get vetted for a potential vice presidential nomination?
No, not in 2020.
Not even close. Did y'all even get vetted for maybe a cabinet position?
No.
Wow. Do you view that as an insult at all that Joe Biden didn't even consider the most popular Hispanic in the entire presidential race?
Again, you're talking to his mother. So from that mother perspective, yes. But from the perspective of, there could have been Joaquin. I mean, he's a congressman. There, at least we have a couple of Latinos on that are going to be serving in the cabinet. So that will make some difference.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Castro. Chad, I believe you have a question, my friend.
I do have a question and a comment. It must be really nice to be able to flex on other moms when they're bragging about their kids. I feel like you really gotta really have an advantage at the table on that. But we've been talking a lot about the importance of voting. And as you mentioned, we at GET as an organization are looking to get people to go out and vote, to register to vote. And I can't tell you how many times we have sat there as a group scratching our heads on what's the effective method. And I know you've got a lot of experience in this. Do you have like one or two things that you've done that you found have been more effective to get people out to vote?
Well, I think that, first of all, the fact that you all get together and lots of heads are better than one in terms of coming up with strategy. One of the things that I'm really happy about my sons is they're very strategic. And in the early days, there's a lot of different things that we did. For example, when they first ran, we used the little postcards to friends We had friends send out to their friends. We haven't used that in a long time, really that much, but it was effective. Now, that was often to people who are already registered to vote. If they weren't, we try to make sure that they got registered. Because again, the thing about, there's two things. Okay, one, you can go out cold and just try to get people in a line waiting for a bus. One of the effective things have been people who are already in a line for something to try to get them registered. But the most effective thing is something personal that you can relate to, whether that's through a friendship, through some kind of group that you belong to, somehow to make that a personal relationship. The other thing that's very important, and I was thinking about you guys today, the other thing is that you all came out of very creative concepts. You're about creativity and art. And even this that you're doing today, that the fact that you're creative is what it takes, I think, to get people out to vote and to get people registered to vote. Because you'll come up with ideas that other people have not come up with. The arts can move people the way talking doesn't do it. And I'll just give you an example. When I was in Raza Unida, we had a lot of great orators, you know, but one of the things I saw was like Teatro del Barrio, for example. That was a theater group put together locally, and they would go out and do little vignettes about something that was wrong, that needed to be fixed. And that hit people more in their minds, in their hearts, in their spirits, I think, than all the talk in the world. Same thing with the art, the visual art. If you look at art during the Chicano movement, you find some very powerful art that moved people. They saw that, and all of a sudden, something in the brain opens up. And that's why I say creativity is a way that you look at things and you make things happen. Today, I thought of you because I don't know if y'all have had a chance to read or listen to the poem that the young woman did today. It was incredible. And it had the power to move you like speeches don't. They said that she stole the show. If you listen to what she said there, it just really does call up in you the spirit of America. And so I would urge, if you didn't get a chance to, please look at that. But I think that creativity, innovation, thinking about things that somebody hasn't tried, those are ways that we would try to get to people. And I think, you know, that one of the things we did with ARP, for example, we got a lot of us that are older when we went to register people at college. And it worked. You know, we weren't sure that it would work because they said, what are these old geezers doing here? But no, and they talked about, the kids talked about their parents and grandparents and, you know, the fear of when they had to support their grandparents or their parents, and why they thought about ARP and stuff like that. So you have the power to think of innovative ways. And you also have what we didn't have. You have methods of communication like Facebook, like all the social media. You have other methods. I don't even know. I can't do TikTok. I wouldn't even know. I have been trying to get into Instagram, haven't succeeded yet. But you have things, you do things we couldn't even dream of. And so that's why I think that you're going to be a lot more successful at reaching people, minds and their hearts, and getting them to understand the importance for you and for them.
Thank you. Yeah, speaking of that, we want to talk about rebuilding. We came out of a devastating 4 years, and we had a devastating 2020. We saw racial injustice come to a head. We're in the middle of a global pandemic with with a lack of leadership. And I want to know, in your opinion, what is a way to give some hope to people, to keep people paying attention, to keep them wanting to be a part of change and growing our country?
Well, I think, this has been a very hard year. And we were talking about workers' issues. I didn't even think to mention, but as you talked about the pandemic, there were so many workers that are frontline workers, and they've been treated so badly. They were told they had to report for work no matter what. And, you take a meat packing plant, you take the people that are farm workers, you take people at the groceries, and they had to report for work or they'd lose their job, which they couldn't afford to do. And I think that's an issue that we really need to make sure never happens again. But I think what keeps people hopeful is several things. One is that the great ability to imagine a world that can be better. Because if you can't do that, things never get better. So that to me is one of the first things, that even when you're down at your lowest, to be able to say, okay, I can imagine this changing. I can imagine creating something better. And it's that vision that you have that guides you towards that. For me, one of my motivating parts, and I think if any of you are parents, you know this already, having kids is a big motivating factor because you always want the best for them. And you know that particularly many of us that are people of color have not always gotten the best, and you don't want them to run into that. So your motivation then becomes making sure you can bust those barriers so that they don't have to go through the same things. And I think that's a big motivation. For me, the other thing was that I often read quotes and books and listen to audio in my car and stuff that was inspirational. I read in the early Chicano movement, I also read a lot of the Black thinkers that were doing things at the time, not just civil rights, but also the Panthers and other groups. I read, as well as Latino literature. But I took a lot of solace from that and inspiration from that. Martin Luther King, there was a comment today that quoted him about not walking alone. And you think about that, that idea that we have to be together, we have to be organized if we are going to be able to get that vision that we're thinking about. And so for me, I've been blessed my whole life in having, I didn't have brothers and sisters, but I have a lot of friends, and we together worked on many causes. And to this day, I have several friends that we often can rely on each other to call each other up and say, look, I'm doing this project. Are you interested? So to me, you get some of your best inspiration from your friends, from those people that will sit there and think with you and come up with brilliant ideas with you, and then will help you carry them through. So to me, having a group that you can be part of is very important in terms of continuing an inspiration.
Very good. We have another question from Ryan Thompson. And then right after that, we're going to get to some audience questions, especially those from Lisa Walden and a couple of others. So Ryan, why don't you take it away?
Well, speaking of change, today we inaugurated a new president and a new vice president. You talked about it earlier, but I want to know actually how it feels for you to see the first woman vice president be sworn in.
It's incredible. I really was depressed when Hillary didn't win because I had hoped to see the first woman president before I died. I'm 73, so it ain't going to be much longer.
You got time.
Now, to at least see the first woman vice president and then a woman of color, that's a twofer there. That's a very exciting. It's hopeful. It's the kind, when you talk about inspiration, you can imagine what young children will be able to finally see, that it's not all one type of person that can be president. We've often said, I think Julián has said too, and I have a granddaughter who's 11 now, but all her life that we would ask her, hey, you want to be president? It was like, nope, why not? Because boys are the president. She had that in her head since she was little. Even though her father is mayor and has been very active, it's just that Kamala will make such a big difference in terms of what everyone can aspire to. And even though so many of us are told, oh, in this country, anyone can be president, I don't think a lot of people believe that. Now there is a change, just as there was with Barack Obama. It's so significant, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of that too. I'm thrilled.
Yes, thank you.
Very, very good. I want to get to some of our audience questions. The first one we have is from Lisa Cortez Walden. She just wanted to make a comment and say, thank you for pointing out how we as artists can impact voter registration. That was to you, Rosie. The next comment we have from an audience member is actually a question. And she wants to know, what are some of Rosie's favorite books or on her top recommended list? Rosie, please fill us in.
Oh, wow. There's a whole lot of them. I'm not in the room with the books right now, but right now I've been going through one that was written by a professor who's part of the Refusing to Forget. And it's dealing with the Texas Ranger massacre at Porvenir. That's a part of history I never really was familiar with until more recently, when professors out of UT Austin and then some from other universities started to look at Texas and its lawmakers, law enforcement, and what they did. But in terms of some of the others, I read a lot of the early books which dealt with Malcolm X, with Martin Luther King. I read a lot of poetry. And so whenever I get a chance, I'll pick up a poetry book that has several different poems. There's a lot of different ones. I mean, obviously, Sandra Cisneros. There's a great poem she's done called You Bring Out the Mexican in Me, which I love. Rosemary Catacoles, who did a beautiful poem that she won an award for, about kids at JT Brackenridge, the last day of school, and how they're throwing all their papers up in the air, all their homework and everything else. If you ever get a chance to read that, it's a great poem. I've read everything from different management books to a lot of Chicano. I went through a period where I only read Latina women's books. So, there's just a whole lot that I could recommend individually.
Well, thank you, Ms. Castro. We appreciate that very much. We're now going to go to the lightning round of questions we have. These questions are from our board members, so please try to answer them as quickly as you can. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
Are you sure?
I think so.
All right, don't bullshit with me because I'm coming at you quick.
All right.
Ready? Here we go.
Yeah.
First and foremost, can you talk about when you realized your legacy, what your legacy was going to be in politics?
I don't know what that legacy will be other than my sons. They will definitely be a big part of what that legacy is. So.
Very good. Okay, next question. When was the first time you spoke on an issue and you knew that issue was going to be your lifetime passion?
Well, I think the presentation before the Senate on the voting age was a really difficult one, but I think it really made me realize that we have to speak up. Otherwise, nothing changes.
Why was that difficult?
It was difficult because of the audience. which was all white and old and not sympathetic. Um, and also because as a young person, going before a Senate committee is frightening.
When you saw that all white man panel before you, how nervous did you get? And then how did you deal with those nerves? And then I'm going to move on to the next audience question.
Sure. First of all, I had said no to it. When they asked me to do it, I said no. But my mentor, Dr. Margaret Kramer, said, oh, yeah, well, I don't expect you. I'm sure you can't do it anyway. Well, that made me say yes, because nobody should tell me no. But all the way through, we had to drive up there when we got there. I mean, I was nervous, but I still did it. So I was happy about that.
Very good. Next question. Could you talk about the other women organizers in your life who helped to support you, and how did they do that?
There have been many, many. And Irma Mireles, who's my comadre, comes from the Rasunita days. Irma was always an extremely supportive person in terms of she always kept all of the minutes, all of the written stuff about the party. She always delivered. She said she was going to do something, she did it. She always helped to organize, and she always had a very large network of people. I've watched people that are giants, people like Bambi Cárdenas Ramirez, who was a member of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights when Reagan came in. He let go of her and Mary Berry. They sued Reagan and they won. But Bambi Cárdenas, who now lives in Austin, has been an incredible civil rights fighter. And I was very fortunate to get to know her. I've also known Sister Yolanda Tarango, who was a co-founder of the Visitation House, which was a shelter at one time, then a transitional housing for women and their children. I've known union organizers and farm worker organizers like Rebecca, and so many women. The thing about a lot of the women that I've known is they've never been totally recognized for all their contributions. And of course, there's Maria Antonieta Berriozábal, whom I had the pleasure of working for towards getting elected, and then in the mayoral race that she lost. But we've spent years working on a lot of different projects. So, and there are so many women, more than I could name probably.
Well, I've got one more question,
Okay.
specifically as it pertains to women. What advice do you have for females who are wanting to run for office?
Well, I think that, I just talked to one recently, and one of the things I always say, okay, you gotta sit down, take a look at who your networks are, write them all down, and what you can count on them to do. Look at the issues you're involved with. Set up a focus group with people you trust, and look at what issues are important to them in their community. Talk to people. Make sure that you have the heart of the community, the issues of the community that you want to bring to running. The difficult thing for women has often been raising money. I think it's getting easier now, especially with the small donor type of efforts. So there isn't any reason why we shouldn't see more women running for all offices. And I hope that we will see in my lifetime that, a woman that will run for president. We still need,
Very good.
We need you running for Senate and school board and everything else too.
Everything in between. And I've got a question about women running for office that I'm going to ask you in just a second, but we have one last audience question that I want to make sure that we ask. You have clearly raised two sons who have a deep belief in the equality of opportunity and service to community. What bits of mom wisdom that you imparted on them do you think attributed to their service leadership spirits?
Well, I think, one of the things that we always did is we always talked about stuff, even when they were little. We always debated. And I often said, their friends would think we were crazy. We were hollering at each other, but we were debating issues. And people thought we were arguing mean, but we weren't. We just loved arguing. And I think that that's something that's always been helpful, because you have to learn that you can argue and not hate somebody. You're arguing different points of view. It also helps people to develop their way of thinking, to look at things strategically. And that's one of the things that I like to think that my sons were able to do. Now, I took my sons everywhere I went, and I took them into the voting booths. They knew what voting was and how important it was. So that's another thing that I think that we all have to do, is make sure that our children have that sense of responsibility about voting.
Very last question for you, Ms. Castro, and then I'm going to hand it over to Ryan, who has a very special surprise just for you.
Okay.
The question I'm going to ask you is this. A lot of people watch this and they'll say, this young lady knows a lot about politics, and I bet you she could fight for us in a way nobody else could. Ms. Rosie Castro, what would it take? What would the people have to do to get you to run for some kind of elected office? Just tell us what we got to do.
Oh, Roy, thank you. I did that before. I ran for city council, didn't
Yes,
win.
ma'am, but you did that in the 70s when Latinos were few and far in between on the ballot. So let me ask you this. Now that we are a little bit more popular and we have way more opportunity, is there any chance we could get you to do it? Because I believe if you did it, it wouldn't be for any kind of political opportunism or for any kind of corporate structure. It would be because you believed in the people. So is there anything we could do to get you to run on behalf of the people?
Thank you, but I was 23 when I ran. I'm 73 now. So for me, this is something that's important. You know, I've lived a life already. I've done a lot of these things. I'm supportive of anybody who's doing it. But I feel that sometimes when you reach a certain age, you need to move off and let other people have an opportunity. You know, I don't believe in hoarding. When I was coming up, there were people that were like the gatekeepers, and they were often the older people that didn't want the younger people coming in. I was also fortunate to watch some of those folks that did want and welcome younger people. That's what I'd like to do rather than think about running. I'll support, and I still to this day support people as well as my sons, but I don't see running in my future. But I will serve on boards and things like that.
Although
So a
you
write-in
don't serve,
campaign then.
if there was a write-in campaign that elected you to a mayoral position, would
Thank
you
you.
accept?
No, I don't think that's going to happen.
All right. Well, Ryan, take it away.
Thank
Let's
you.
give her that goddamn surprise we got for.
We were trying to get you to admit that you're running for president in 2024. We're trying to get the exclusive scoop, but we didn't get it. We'll have to try harder next time. So we've got a great gift for you. We have a local musician who has actually written and performed an original song that's dedicated to you.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Her name is Allison Alonso. Allison Alonso is an out and proud queer recording artist who lives and works in San Antonio, Texas. She also hosts a radio show on Trinity University's KRTU 91.7 FM that goes by the name of Queer Vibes. Learn more about Allison and follow her at AllisonAlonso.com. So we're going to play the song for you right now. Let's hear it.
Okay, I'm gonna sing it a cappella until we can pull it up.
Oh no.
Just kidding. It's not gonna happen, Rosie.
Well, in between time, Rosie, I'm going to ask you, I plan on running for city council at some point. So I'm going to need your help.
Yeah, sure. When do you plan to do it?
2023, we'll see.
Okay. District 1?
Yeah, hopefully.
Good, good.
Yeah.
That's
How are you gonna say exactly the year and exactly the district and then say also, we'll see? That's some bullshit if I ever heard it.
Sounds like a plan already.
I go back and forth every day.
This is Allison Alonso, and her This is Alison Alonso, and here's a song I wrote dedicated to Rosie Castro. Thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for helping everyone. It's with humility and grace you've made the world a better place. We know it hasn't been easy. The work takes time, and you run the marathon for all of us. It's the legacy you've built, a strong foundation like a quilt that brings us together. Thank you for all the work you've done. Thank you for helping everyone. It's with humility and grace you've made the world a better place. You've made the world a better place.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Allison. And all of you, I really appreciate it.
That was beautiful. Wow. Well,
Denise, I believe you have something. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I don't. I'm sorry if I raised my hand.
Well, you did. But Rosie, we want to say thank you very much for being on the program. I hope that you very much enjoyed that very special musical act from Allison Alonso. That was beautiful. Anything you want to say?
It's very beautiful, and thank you so much. It's very moving and touching. I really appreciate it, and it's such you guys. It's so innovative. It's beautiful. I really appreciate that, Allison, and all of you. So you can count on my support whenever you need it, guys. So all you have to do is ask.
Well, that's so funny that you asked that, because while we're on the podcast, we were hoping you would commit to a $5,000 donation.
If I could have done 5,000.
I just figured I might as well make it big. You're here already.
You take installments.
All right. We're going to wrap this episode up. Let's start with Rosie Castro. Madame, let us give you an opportunity to say whatever it is that you would like to the people before we go.
Just thank you very much for being here tonight. I know it's a special night with inauguration. And again, thank you for the beautiful song. Thank you for your questions. And the thing that always makes me very happy is to see y'all, to see what the city has. You are the city leaders, and the city has a lot in store with folks like you that are dedicated already to betterment of this city and of this country. So thank you very much for everything that you all are doing. And thanks, Lauren, too. I don't see her there, but I know she must be around somewhere.
Very good. Yes, of course. We all want to thank Doc for her tireless efforts to make things better. Ryan, you are up next. Tell the people what it is you'd like to tell them before we.
well, I have to say thank you to Rosie. You're amazing. I was raised by a single mother I said I wasn't going to cuss. She's a badass woman, and you are a badass woman, and we love and just respect badass women. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And thank you for all the wisdom that you imparted today. I'm honestly leaving here feeling refreshed and even better. But I want to say to all you guys that are listening, if you want to listen to our podcast, you can find us anywhere where streaming is available at Growing Empowered Together. Get_Texas is an easier way to do it. Social media, anything you want to do, but definitely check us out. And this will be added to our platform as soon as possible. So thank you guys.
Very good. Next up, Andrea. Say goodbye, my dear.
Rosie, thank you so much for this. There's so many things that I could say, but I will amount it to this. I opened this saying that I am an undocumented citizen, and the reality is I'm not a US citizen. I can't become a US citizen yet. Hopefully, if this immigration bill passes, I will have a pathway soon. But something that I've learned in these last 4 years is that I will never idolize politicians. What I will idolize is people that have paved the way for individuals like myself to be here. And I definitely think, Rosie, that you have made impacts to the city of San Antonio that I could never repay, that no one could ever repay. And when I look at everyone here today, I think we are all a little bit better just by hearing your voice and by knowing that you're going to continue to be here to be a supporting role model in the next coming years. I am very proud to know that you are part of our city. Seriously, thank you for everything that you've done for us and that you will continue to do. Because when I become a US citizen one day, I know I will vote for you for something. So you better run for something. Seriously. 74 years young. Don't ever say it.
Thanks.
Oh, I pray to God this woman runs for mayor. We could use one good choice. All right. Next up, we've got Chad Hankins.
Rosie, absolute pleasure. I'm with Ryan. I think we've all been a little run down lately from everything going on, and just talking to you really has been rejuvenating. And I also think that we're going to need to go ahead and start that writing campaign. I think we're all on board with that. So get ready to see that coming down the pike. But thank you so much for talking to us and for everything that you've done. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack.
Very good. And last but not least, we want to thank our special guest co-host, Ms. Denise Hernandez. Madam, please say goodbye to the people and anything else you'd like to say.
Thank you, Roy. I just want to say thanks to everybody who tuned in and, stays engaged and continues to work really hard for San Antonio, for Texas, for this country. And, we're all global citizens, I feel. So, we all just need to stay connected. Rosie, I just want to thank you again for everything you are, everything you do, all the energy you put back into this world, but especially in San Antonio, because it's my deep passion to ensure that this city is represented by the people, for the people. I think we've seen so many folks get lost in these conversations, and people like us are very not much included in them. And so I'm always just so grateful that you demand and that you continue to advocate and use your time. I want to do a shameless plug for anyone who is interested in keeping up with what's happening locally, especially related to policy at City Council and at the county. I have a newsletter that I send out weekly. I try. It's called Political Chisme. And so we are taking contributions from folks. Whoever wants to share anything about policy or what's going on in the community, please subscribe. You can email us at politicalchisme210@gmail.com, and I can get you signed up for that newsletter, just so we can all stay engaged. And it's good to have that education so we can fight for the things that matter most to our communities. So yeah, just thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed being with you again.
And I can't tell you guys how much Political Chisme is the place you want to be. Sign up for that newsletter because it is everything. And I mean everything if you are a political junkie here in San Antonio. Rarely do you get the opportunity to see behind the curtain, but Denise takes you there. Before we get going, Ms. Castro, I have exactly one last question for you, and then I promise I will leave you the fuck alone. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. You've been in this a long time. And over again, the priorities that you have fought for have not been victorious, but you continue to fight anyways. What is it that should give us as brand new activists hope, even in the face of obstacles and things that we cannot overcome?
Well, I think that there's hope in your faith, there's hope in yourself, in your spirit. And there's hope in the organizing that you do with the people that you do it, because it's that vision that gives you the hope. It's that vision that inspires you to keep going. I think that right now, the fact that you are all there, you're all safe, to me, that's a wonderful thing, because it has been a hard year, but you and a lot of us have overcome the hard year. And there will be many other hard years, but we will overcome that too. You're incredible, you're amazing, and you're the best that we could hope for. And I'm so very proud that you're San Antonians. So thank you for being who you are.
And Miss Castro, even though you're giving those compliments to Denise, I will take them as though they were my own. Thank you very much. For you folks at home, I'm sorry, go ahead, Miss Castro.
I'm going to join the newsletter there. I'll look for it.
Absolutely. Political Chisme is a place to be. And also, Get Texas is a place for the podcast that mean the most to you folks at home. We give you all the information and none of the bullshit. For you folks at home, we want to say thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you next time.
Great.